The train lurched to a stop so suddenly that Olivia Anderson's forehead knocked against the cold glass window, jolting her from an exhausted sleep, just as the conductor's voice bellowed through the car that this was Clearwater Junction, Wyoming territory, and anyone not getting off should remain seated. Olivia's heart seized in her chest as she pressed her face against the window, squinting through the darkness at a station that looked nothing like the description Mr. Frederick Ashford had sent in his letters. She fumbled for the carefully folded papers in her reticule, her hands trembling as she tried to read his words by the dim light of the oil lamps swaying in the passenger car. Williamsburg. She was supposed to get off at Williamsburg. This was not Williamsburg. But before she could call out to the conductor, before she could gather her wits enough to ask if Williamsburg was the next stop, or if she had somehow already passed it, the train gave another violent lurch and began moving again, wheels screeching against the rails as it picked up speed. The station disappeared into the darkness behind them, and Olivia felt her stomach drop like a stone into a bottomless well. She sat frozen in her seat as the realization crept over her like ice water. She had fallen asleep. She had missed her stop. She was supposed to meet Mr. Ashford at the Williamsburg station at 6:30 in the evening, and now it was well past 7 according to the small watch pinned to her bodice, and she had no idea where she was or where she was going. The other passengers in the car paid her no mind. A farmer with weathered hands dozed across the aisle, his hat pulled low over his eyes. A woman with 2 small children had her hands full keeping them quiet and still. No one noticed as Olivia's breath began to come in short, panicked gasps. As her vision blurred with tears, she tried desperately to hold back. She had sold everything she owned to buy this train ticket. She had left Philadelphia with nothing but a single trunk and the clothes on her back. Fleeing a city that had become unbearable after her father's death left her penniless and alone. Becoming a mail-order bride had seemed like her only option, her only chance at a new life far from the creditors and the pitying looks and the dark, empty boarding house room that was all she could afford. And now she had ruined it. She had ruined everything before it had even begun. The train rattled on through the night, and Olivia pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to make herself as small as possible in her seat. She did not know what she would do when the train finally stopped again. She had no money for a return ticket. She had no way to send word to Mr. Ashford. She did not even know if he would still want her after she had failed to arrive as promised. The tears came then, hot and shameful, sliding down her cheeks as she turned her face back to the window so no one would see. The Wyoming landscape rushed past in the darkness, vast and empty and terrifying in its unfamiliarity. When the train finally screeched to a halt again, the conductor announced Rollins, "End of the line for tonight, everyone off." Olivia stood on shaking legs, her whole body stiff from hours of sitting, and made her way down the aisle with the other passengers. The conductor helped her down the steps, and she stood on the platform in the cold night air, watching as her trunk was unceremoniously dumped beside her. Rollins was barely more than a collection of rough buildings huddled together against the wind. The station was just a small wooden structure with a waiting room that looked none too clean. Oil lamps cast weak pools of light across the platform, and Olivia could see her breath misting in the air before her. The other passengers dispersed quickly, claimed by waiting family members or heading off purposefully into the night as if they knew exactly where they were going. Within minutes, Olivia was alone on the platform except for a station worker who was already extinguishing the lamps. She sank down onto her trunk, her legs no longer willing to hold her upright, and buried her face in her hands. The tears came harder now, great shaking sobs that she could not control. Everything had gone so wrong. She was lost and alone in a strange town with no money and no prospects, and it was all her own fault for falling asleep, for being so careless, for thinking she could actually make something of herself out here in this harsh, unforgiving land. She did not hear the footsteps approaching, did not notice she was no longer alone until a deep voice spoke from somewhere above her. "Miss, are you all right?" Olivia's head snapped up, and she found herself looking at a man who seemed to have materialized out of the shadows. He was tall, with broad shoulders outlined against the starlit sky, wearing a worn leather jacket and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. She could make out a strong jaw, dark eyes that looked concerned rather than threatening, and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. She tried to speak, but only managed a hiccuping sob. She must look absolutely pathetic, she thought, sitting here on her trunk crying like a lost child. The man shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, and she saw him glance around as if hoping someone else might appear to take over this situation. When no one came, he crouched down so he was more at her eye level, resting his forearms on his knees. Up close, she could see he was perhaps in his late 20s, with a face that was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all strong lines and sun-weathered skin. There was a kindness in his eyes that made her want to cry even harder. "What happened?" he asked gently. "Did someone hurt you?" Olivia shook her head, trying to gather herself enough to speak coherently. "No," she managed, her voice hoarse from crying. "No, I missed my stop. I was supposed to get off at Williamsburg, but I fell asleep and now I am here and I do not know what to do." The man was quiet for a moment, and in the lamplight, she saw understanding cross his features. "You were meeting someone in Williamsburg," she nodded miserably. "Mr. Frederick Ashford. I was supposed to arrive at 6:30, and I am quite certain he is not waiting for me anymore." "Frederick Ashford," the man repeated, and something shifted in his expression. "The banker from back east who bought the old Morrison property?" "Yes," Olivia said, surprised that he knew of him. "Do you know him?" "I know of him," the man said carefully. "Williamsburg is not a large town. Everyone knows of everyone." He stood up then, his full height imposing but not threatening. "My name is Benjamin Tucker. I have a ranch about an hour's ride from Williamsburg. I was in Rawlins picking up supplies and I am heading back now. I can take you there if you would like." Olivia stared up at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You would do that? But you do not even know me." "No," Benjamin admitted, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "But I know what it is like to be far from home and in need of help. Besides, it is too late for you to find proper lodging here tonight, and you should not be sitting out here alone in the cold." There was something in his voice, something warm and steady, that made Olivia feel safer than she had felt since leaving Philadelphia. She knew she should be more cautious, should not trust a stranger so readily, but what choice did she have? She could not stay here on the platform all night, and she had no money for a hotel even if she could find one that would take an unaccompanied woman. "Thank you," she said, pushing herself to her feet. Her legs wobbled slightly and Benjamin reached out to steady her, his hand gentle but firm on her elbow. "Thank you so much. I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness." "No repayment needed," Benjamin said. He bent to pick up her trunk as if it weighed nothing at all, though Olivia knew it was heavy with all her worldly possessions. "My wagon is just over here. The ride will be bumpy, I am afraid, but I have some blankets you can wrap up in." He led her across the platform to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to two patient horses. True to his word, there were blankets folded in the back, and Benjamin arranged them carefully on the bench seat before helping Olivia up. His hands were work roughened but gentle, And Olivia felt a strange flutter in her chest that she firmly told herself was just nerves and exhaustion. Benjamin secured her trunk in the wagon bed, and then climbed up beside her, taking up the reins with practiced ease. As they pulled away from the station and out into the darkness of the Wyoming night, Olivia realized she was putting her complete trust in a man she had just met. But somehow, sitting beside him in the wagon with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders and the stars spreading out endlessly overhead, she did not feel afraid. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Olivia found herself stealing glances at Benjamin's profile, at the strong line of his jaw and the capable way he handled the reins. There was something solid about him, something reliable that called to something deep inside her. "So you are meant to marry Frederick Ashford," Benjamin said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was carefully neutral, but Olivia thought she detected something underneath it, some emotion she could not quite identify. "Yes," she said, looking down at her hands folded in her lap. "We have been corresponding for 3 months. He placed an advertisement in the Philadelphia newspaper seeking a wife, and I answered it." "Why?" The question was blunt but not unkind, and when Olivia looked over at him, she saw genuine curiosity in his expression. She considered lying, painting a prettier picture of her circumstances, but something about the honest darkness and Benjamin's straightforward manner made her want to tell the truth. "My father died 6 months ago. He left debts, and after everything was sold to pay them, I had nothing. I was working as a seamstress, but the wages were barely enough to keep me fed and housed. I was desperate for a way out, for a chance at a better life. When I saw Mr. Ashford's advertisement, it seemed like the answer to a prayer." Benjamin was quiet again, processing this information. The wagon hit a rut in the road, and Olivia grabbed onto the seat to steady herself. "What did he tell you about himself?" Benjamin asked. "In his letters, I mean." "He said he owns a successful dry goods store in Williamsburg," Olivia recited from memory. "He said he has a comfortable house and is looking for a sensible wife to help him run his household. He sent me a photograph. He looks like a respectable gentleman." "He is respectable enough," Benjamin allowed, "though I would not call him a warm man. He keeps to himself mostly, cares a great deal about appearances and what the town thinks of him." Something in Benjamin's tone made Olivia's stomach clench with worry. "You do not like him?" "I did not say that," Benjamin said quickly. "I barely know the man. He has only been in Williamsburg about a year. I am just saying." "Well, I am not sure what I am saying. It is not my business anyway. You made an agreement with him and you should honor it." But even as he said it, Olivia could hear the reluctance in his voice, and it confused her. She barely knew this man, had only met him less than an hour ago, so why did his opinion matter so much to her? Why did the thought of him disapproving of her marriage to Frederick Ashford make her feel hollow inside? They rode on through the night, and gradually, Olivia's exhaustion caught up with her again. Her eyelids grew heavy, and despite her best efforts to stay awake and alert, she found herself nodding off. At one point, she jerked awake to find that she had slumped sideways against Benjamin's shoulder. She sat up quickly, mortified, but Benjamin just gave her a gentle smile. "It is all right," he said. "You have had a long journey. Rest if you need to." And so she did, allowing herself to lean against his solid warmth, feeling safer than she had any right to feel with a stranger. When she woke again, dawn was just beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, and the wagon was pulling up in front of a white-painted house with a wide porch and shuttered windows. "This is my place," Benjamin said quietly, as if reluctant to wake her fully. "I thought you might want to rest properly and have some breakfast before we continue on to Williamsburg. It is another hour's ride from here, And you look done in." Olivia sat up, trying to smooth her hair and straighten her rumpled dress. She must look a fright, she thought, after crying and sleeping in her clothes and traveling all night. "I do not want to impose," she said, but even as she spoke, her stomach growled audibly, betraying how hungry she was. Benjamin smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his serious face and made him look younger, almost boyish. "It is no imposition. Come on, let me show you inside." The house was modest but well kept, with sturdy furniture and clean floors. Benjamin led her to a small bedroom and brought in her trunk, setting it down carefully at the foot of the bed. "There is fresh water in the pitcher," he said, gesturing to the washstand. "Take your time freshening up. I will start breakfast." Left alone, Olivia poured water into the basin and washed her face and hands, the cool water refreshing after the long night. She unpinned her hair and brushed it out before pinning it back up more neatly, and changed into a fresh shirtwaist from her trunk. When she looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she still looked tired, but at least she looked presentable. She found Benjamin in the kitchen, standing at the stove and frying eggs in a cast iron skillet. Coffee was already brewing, filling the room with its rich aroma. The domesticity of the scene struck Olivia with unexpected force. This was what a marriage should look like, she thought. Two people sharing the small intimacies of daily life, comfortable in each other's presence. "Sit down," Benjamin said, pulling out a chair for her at the small table. "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage eggs and biscuits." The food was simple but delicious, and Olivia ate with an appetite she had not felt in weeks. Benjamin sat across from her, drinking his coffee and watching her with those dark, thoughtful eyes. There was something in his gaze that made her heart beat faster, something warm and intent that she did not quite know how to interpret. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly, setting down her fork. "You could have just left me there at the station. Why did you take the trouble to bring me all this way?" Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and earnest. "When I saw you sitting there crying, something in my chest just tightened up. I could not leave you there any more than I could leave an injured animal by the side of the road. And then, when you told me you were meant for Ashford." He trailed off, shaking his head. "What?" Olivia prompted. "What about Mr. Ashford?" "Nothing," Benjamin said quickly. "Like I said before, it is not my business. You made an agreement and you should see it through." But Olivia was not satisfied with that answer. She leaned forward, studying Benjamin's face. "You think I should not marry him?" "I think," Benjamin said carefully, "that you deserve better than a marriage of convenience to a man who cares more about having a housekeeper than a true wife. I think you deserve someone who will look at you the way I—" He stopped abruptly, a flush creeping up his neck. Olivia's breath caught. "The way you what?" Benjamin stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He carried his dishes to the sink, his back to her, his shoulders tense. "Never mind. I am speaking out of turn. You do not even know me." "I know you were kind to me when I needed kindness," Olivia said softly. "I know you gave me shelter and food without expecting anything in return. I know that when I woke up leaning against you in the wagon, I felt safer than I have felt since my father died. That counts for something." Benjamin turned around slowly, and the look in his eyes made Olivia's heart race. "Miss Anderson," he said, and his voice was rough with some emotion she could not name. "Olivia, I know we only just met, I know this is madness, but I have to say it. When I saw you there at that station, looking so lost and sad, something in me just knew. And I know you are promised to another man. I know I have no right to say this, but what if you missed your stop for a reason? What if this was always your stop?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Olivia stood up on trembling legs, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "What are you saying?" "I am saying do not go to Williamsburg," Benjamin said, closing the distance between them. "I am saying stay here with me. I know it is crazy. I know we barely know each other, but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for you to show up on that platform. Stay here and let me court you properly. Let me show you what it is like to be cherished, not just convenient." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes again, but these were different from the hopeless tears she had shed at the station. These were tears of hope, of possibility, of something bright and new unfurling in her chest. "But what about Mr. Ashford? I made a promise." "You made a promise based on letters and a photograph," Benjamin said. "You do not owe him your whole life. If you want to go to him, if you want to honor that agreement, I will take you there right now and wish you well. But if there is even a small part of you that thinks maybe this meeting was not just chance, maybe it was fate, then stay. Give me a chance to make you happy." Olivia looked up into his earnest face, at the hope and fear and longing written plainly in his eyes, and she knew what her answer would be. She had thought she was traveling to Wyoming to marry Frederick Ashford, but maybe she had really been traveling to find Benjamin Tucker. Maybe missing her stop had been the best mistake of her life. "I will stay," she whispered, and Benjamin's face broke into a smile so bright it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached for her hands, taking them gently in his own. "You will not regret this," he promised. "I will spend every day proving to you that you made the right choice." "I believe you," Olivia said, and she did. Against all logic and reason, she believed him completely. But even as joy flooded through her, practical concerns pushed their way to the surface. "What about Mr. Ashford? He will be expecting me. I should at least write to him and explain." Benjamin nodded, his expression sobering. "Of course. We will go into Williamsburg this afternoon and you can post a letter to him. It is the right thing to do to let him know you will not be coming." "Will there be gossip?" Olivia asked worriedly. "About me staying here with you without being married?" "Probably," Benjamin admitted. "Williamsburg is a small town and people talk, but I have a solution for that if you are willing." He took a deep breath and she could see him gathering his courage. "Marry me. Not someday in the future after a long courtship, but soon. This week, even. I know it is fast, but you were already prepared to marry a stranger. At least with me, you know I will always put you first." Olivia's head spun at the suggestion. It was mad, impulsive, completely irrational. She had known this man for less than 12 hours. But she had known Frederick Ashford even less, really, just words on paper and a photograph. And she had never felt for Frederick Ashford even a fraction of what she felt standing here in Benjamin's kitchen with her hands in his, her heart racing and her whole body alive with possibility. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will marry you." Benjamin let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and a sob all mixed together. And then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her close against his chest. Olivia wrapped her arms around his waist and buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the scent of him, leather and soap, and something uniquely Benjamin. She could feel his heart pounding against her cheek, as fast as her own. "I promise you will not regret this," he murmured into her hair. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making you happy." "I believe you," Olivia said again, and she lifted her face to look at him. His eyes were soft as he looked down at her, and when he lowered his head and brushed his lips gently against hers, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss was sweet and chaste, a promise rather than a demand, and when they pulled apart, Olivia was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. They spent the rest of the morning talking, learning about each other in great gulps of information. Benjamin told her about his ranch, how he had bought the land 5 years ago with money saved from working as a ranch hand, how he had built the house himself with help from his neighbors. He told her about the cattle he raised, the work of maintaining the property, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. Olivia told him about Philadelphia, about her father who had been a clerk in a shipping office, about her mother who had died when Olivia was 12. She told him about learning to sew from her mother, about the small joys of her childhood before her father's death had upended everything. She told him about her fears for the future, about the loneliness that had driven her to answer Frederick Ashford's advertisement. "You will never be lonely again," Benjamin promised, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I promise you that." In the early afternoon, they hitched up the wagon again and made the journey into Williamsburg. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with storefronts and a white church with a tall steeple at the far end. Benjamin pointed out the various establishments as they passed: the blacksmith and the general store, and the small restaurant where the widow Peterson served the best apple pie in Wyoming territory. "That is Ashford's place," Benjamin said, nodding toward a neat storefront with Ashford's Dry Goods painted on the window in careful letters. Through the window, Olivia could see a man in a crisp suit standing behind the counter, his hair slicked back and his posture ramrod straight. Even from a distance, there was something cold about him, something that made Olivia very glad she would not be marrying him after all. They stopped at the post office, and Olivia went inside to write her letter. It was difficult to find the right words. She settled finally on a simple explanation: that circumstances had changed, that she had made other arrangements, and that she hoped he would understand and would not have been too inconvenienced by her failure to arrive. She apologized for any trouble she had caused and wished him well in finding a more suitable bride. When she came back out, Benjamin was waiting by the wagon, and the look of relief on his face when he saw her made her heart swell. "All done?" he asked. "All done," she confirmed, and he helped her back up into the wagon. They stopped next at the church, where Benjamin introduced Olivia to Reverend Matthews, a kind-faced man with white hair and laugh lines around his eyes. Benjamin explained the situation, leaving out some of the more complicated details, but making it clear that he and Olivia wished to be married as soon as possible. Reverend Matthews looked between them with a knowing smile. "I have been praying for you to find a good woman, Benjamin," he said. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. If you are both certain of this decision, I can perform the ceremony tomorrow afternoon. That will give you time to arrange for witnesses and make it all legal and proper." "Tomorrow," Olivia repeated, and the reality of it all hit her suddenly. Tomorrow she would be married. Tomorrow she would be Olivia Tucker instead of Olivia Anderson. Tomorrow her whole life would change. Benjamin must have sensed her nervousness because he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Only if you are sure," he said quietly. "We can wait if you need more time." But Olivia shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "Tomorrow is perfect." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the Wyoming sky a brilliant blue from horizon to horizon. Olivia woke in the small bedroom that had been hers for just one night, and lay for a moment staring at the ceiling and marveling at how much her life had changed in such a short time. 2 days ago, she had been on a train heading toward an uncertain future with a man she had never met. Now she was about to marry a different man she had also just met, but somehow this felt completely different. This felt right. There was a soft knock on her door, and Benjamin's voice called out, "I am leaving some breakfast outside your door. I have to go take care of the animals, but I will be back in time for us to leave for town." Olivia opened the door to find a tray with fresh biscuits, butter, and coffee. The thoughtfulness of the gesture made her smile. She ate slowly, savoring the quiet morning and then dressed in her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She took extra care with her hair, pinning it up in an elaborate style she had not bothered with in months. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Benjamin waiting in the front room, and the look on his face when he saw her made all her efforts worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice slightly awed. "So do you," Olivia replied, and it was true. He had cleaned up nicely, wearing dark trousers and a white shirt with a string tie, his hair combed back and his jaw freshly shaved. He looked handsome and solid and real, and Olivia felt a flutter of anticipation low in her belly. The ride into Williamsburg felt both endless and far too short. Benjamin had arranged for two of his neighbors, a rancher named Thomas Green and his wife Martha, to serve as witnesses. They met at the church, and Martha immediately pulled Olivia into a warm embrace. "Benjamin told us all about you," she said, beaming. "We are so happy for you both. Benjamin has been alone too long. He deserves a good woman." The ceremony itself was simple but beautiful. Standing before Reverend Matthews with Benjamin's hands holding hers, Olivia spoke her vows in a clear voice, promising to love and honor and cherish this man who had found her crying at a train station and decided to give her a home. When Benjamin spoke his own vows, his voice was thick with emotion, and Olivia saw tears shining in his eyes. "I promise to protect you and provide for you," he said. "I promise to make you smile every day. I promise that you will never regret choosing me, choosing this life. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife and told Benjamin he could kiss his bride, Benjamin cupped Olivia's face in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that Olivia felt tears slip down her own cheeks. This was what she had been searching for without even knowing it. This connection, this certainty, this overwhelming feeling of coming home. Martha and Thomas insisted on taking them to the restaurant for a celebratory meal, and over roast chicken and potatoes, they asked Olivia about her journey from Philadelphia. She told the story of missing her stop, of being found crying by Benjamin, and Martha laughed and said it sounded like something out of a romantic novel. "The best things in life often come from the worst moments," Thomas said sagely. "You two were meant to find each other." After the meal, Benjamin and Olivia climbed back into the wagon for the journey back to the ranch. Olivia's ranch now, she thought with a thrill. Her home. When they arrived, Benjamin lifted her down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, he scooped her up in his arms. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said with a grin. "It is tradition." He carried her into the house and set her down gently in the front room, and suddenly they were both nervous, the reality of their situation settling over them. They were married now. They were husband and wife, and it was their wedding night. "Olivia," Benjamin said softly, reaching for her hands, "I want you to know that there is no rush for anything. I know this has all happened very fast. If you need time, I can sleep in the barn tonight. I do not want you to feel pressured." Olivia looked up at this good, kind man who had given her so much already, and she knew what she wanted. "I do not want you to sleep in the barn," she said quietly. "I want you to stay with me. I want to be your wife in every way." Benjamin's eyes darkened with desire, but he moved slowly, giving her time to change her mind. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, deeper this time than he had in the church, and Olivia felt heat bloom through her entire body. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice rough. "I am certain," Olivia whispered, and she took his hand and led him toward the bedroom. Their lovemaking was tender and sweet, Benjamin patient and gentle as he introduced Olivia to pleasures she had never imagined. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Olivia's head on Benjamin's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. "I love you," Benjamin said into the darkness, his voice full of wonder. "I know it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love you." Olivia tilted her head up to look at him, and in the moonlight streaming through the window, she could see the truth of his words written plainly on his face. "I love you too," she said, and she realized it was true. Somehow, impossibly, she had fallen in love with this man in less than 2 days. "Is that mad?" "Probably," Benjamin said with a soft laugh. "But I do not care. Sometimes the heart knows things the head cannot explain." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Olivia slept more soundly than she had in months, feeling safe and loved and home. The next weeks passed in a blur of happiness as Olivia settled into her new life. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, waking early to help Benjamin with the morning chores, spending her days cleaning and cooking and making the house truly theirs. She planted a small garden near the house, vegetables and herbs and some wildflower seeds that Martha had given her. She made curtains for the windows from fabric Benjamin bought her on their next trip into town. Slowly but surely, she transformed the bachelor homestead into a real home. Benjamin was everything she could have hoped for in a husband and more. He was patient when she made mistakes, like the time she forgot to latch the chicken coop, and they spent an hour chasing chickens all over the yard. He was thoughtful, bringing her wildflowers from the fields when he came in from checking the cattle. He made her laugh with stories of his early days on the ranch, when he had been learning as he went and made every mistake possible. And at night, when the work was done and they lay together in their bed, he was passionate and tender, learning her body as she learned his, building an intimacy that went far beyond the physical. They talked for hours in the darkness, sharing their dreams and fears and hopes for the future. One evening about a month after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set when Olivia saw a rider approaching. As the figure got closer, she recognized Thomas Green, and something about his grim expression made her stomach clench with worry. "Benjamin," Thomas called out as he pulled his horse to a stop. "We have got trouble. Some of the cattle have gone missing from the south pasture. Looks like rustlers." Benjamin's expression hardened and he stood up, his hand going automatically to the rifle mounted above the door. "How many head?" "At least 20, maybe more," Thomas said. "We are getting a group together to track them. Can you ride out?" Olivia felt fear clutch at her heart. She had heard stories of rustlers, of the violence that could erupt over stolen cattle. "Be careful," she said, standing up and taking Benjamin's hand. He looked down at her and his expression softened. "I will be," he promised. He pulled her close and kissed her hard. "I will be back before you know it." But he was not back before she knew it. He was gone all night and into the next day, and Olivia paced the house, unable to settle to any task, her imagination conjuring terrible scenarios. What if he was hurt? What if he never came back? What if she had found this perfect love only to lose it so soon? It was nearly sunset when she finally saw riders approaching, and she ran out to meet them, her heart in her throat. Benjamin was among them, dusty and exhausted but whole and unharmed. Olivia threw herself into his arms, not caring that he was filthy from the trail. "I am all right," he murmured into her hair. "We got the cattle back. The rustlers headed for the border, but we caught up with them before they got far. They are in the marshal's custody now." "I was so worried," Olivia said, pulling back to look at him. "I thought something terrible had happened." "Nothing terrible happened," Benjamin assured her. "I told you I would come back to you, and I always will. You are stuck with me now, Olivia Tucker." That night, after he had bathed and eaten, they lay in bed and Benjamin held her close. "I have been thinking," he said, "about how much you mean to me, how lost I would be without you." When I was out there tracking those rustlers, all I could think about was getting back to you back home. You have changed everything for me, Olivia. Before you, this ranch was just a place I lived and worked. Now it is home because you are here." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes, the good kind that came from overwhelming happiness. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I came to Wyoming thinking I was making a desperate choice, thinking I was settling for whatever life I could get. But instead I found you. I found love and a home and a future that is better than anything I could have imagined." "We are going to have a good life together," Benjamin said firmly. "I promise you that. We will build something here, something lasting. And someday, God willing, we will have children to fill this house with laughter." The mention of children made Olivia's breath catch. They had not spoken much about the future in such concrete terms, but now that Benjamin had raised the subject, she found herself wanting it fiercely. Children with Benjamin's dark eyes and steady nature, children who would grow up knowing they were loved and wanted. "I would like that," she said softly. "Very much." The seasons changed, summer giving way to fall, and Olivia's life settled into a comfortable rhythm. She made friends in Williamsburg, joining the church ladies' auxiliary and helping with the school fundraiser. She learned to ride a horse so she could accompany Benjamin when he checked the far pastures. She learned to shoot a rifle, though she hoped she would never have to use that particular skill. One day in early October, she was in town buying supplies when she saw Frederick Ashford for the first time since sending him that letter. He was standing outside his store, and when he saw her, his expression hardened. Olivia's stomach knotted with anxiety, but she forced herself to walk over to him. "Mr. Ashford," she said politely, "I hope you are well." He looked at her coldly. "Mrs. Tucker," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I suppose I should congratulate you on your marriage, though I must say I find your conduct highly questionable. To agree to marry one man and then marry another within days of arriving in Wyoming shows a distinct lack of moral character." The word stung, but Olivia forced herself to stand tall. "I apologize for any inconvenience I caused you," she said evenly, "but I do not regret my choice. I married a good man who loves me, and I love him in return. I hope you can understand that love is more important than honor in a situation like this." "Love," Ashford scoffed. "Love is a pretty fairy tale young women tell themselves. Marriage is a practical arrangement, nothing more. You will learn that soon enough when Tucker tires of you." "Benjamin will never tire of me," Olivia said firmly, "because our marriage is built on more than practicality. I am sorry if that is not something you can understand." She walked away before he could respond, her hands shaking but her head held high. When she told Benjamin about the encounter later, she expected him to be angry, but instead he just pulled her close. "Ashford is a bitter man who does not understand what he lost when you chose me instead," Benjamin said. "Do not let his words trouble you. Anyone can see how happy we are together." And they were happy. As autumn deepened and the first snows began to fall, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited until she was certain before telling Benjamin. She chose a quiet evening when they were sitting by the fire, and she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. Benjamin's eyes went wide with shock, and then joy so profound it took Olivia's breath away. "Truly?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Truly," she confirmed, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her and laughing and crying all at once. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." That winter was hard, with heavy snows and bitter cold, but inside their cozy house, Olivia and Benjamin were warm and content. Benjamin was unfailingly solicitous during Olivia's pregnancy, constantly asking if she needed anything, if she was comfortable, if he could get her more pillows or another blanket. Olivia found his concern endearing, even when it bordered on excessive. As her belly grew, they talked endlessly about the baby, arguing good-naturedly over names and making plans for the future. Benjamin built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until it was perfectly smooth and safe for delicate baby skin. Olivia sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. Spring came early that year, the snow melting to reveal the tender green shoots of new grass. Olivia's time was drawing near, and Martha Green had agreed to attend the birth along with the town midwife, a capable woman named Helen Morrison. The baby came on a warm day in late April, and the birth was long and difficult. Olivia labored for nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when she thought she could not endure another minute. But Benjamin was there the whole time, holding her hand and wiping her brow, whispering words of encouragement even when he was clearly terrified. When the baby finally arrived, a robust boy with dark hair and powerful lungs, Olivia felt a surge of love so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. Benjamin cut the cord with shaking hands, and when Helen placed the baby in Olivia's arms, tears streamed down both their faces. "He is perfect," Benjamin breathed, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers curled automatically around Benjamin's finger, and Benjamin let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him William Benjamin Tucker, and he became the center of their world. Olivia had never known she could love anyone as much as she loved her son, except perhaps for Benjamin himself. Watching Benjamin with William, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed their child, made her fall in love with him all over again. The years that followed were full and rich. When William was 2, Olivia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, who kept them all running from morning to night. 2 years after that came another son, Thomas, named for the neighbor who had become such a good friend. The ranch prospered under Benjamin's careful management, and they were able to expand, buying more land and building a bigger house with enough bedrooms for their growing family. Olivia planted a large garden and kept chickens and taught her daughters to sew just as her mother had taught her. She never forgot where she had come from, the desperation that had driven her to answer a mail-order bride advertisement. But that time felt like another life, something that had happened to a different person. One evening when William was 10, and the twins were 8 and Thomas was 6, the family was gathered on the porch watching the sunset. The children were playing some elaborate game that seemed to involve a great deal of running and shrieking, and Olivia sat in the rocking chair Benjamin had made for her, watching them with a contented smile. Benjamin came out of the house and handed her a cup of tea before settling into the chair beside her. "Do you ever think about that night at the train station?" he asked. "About what your life would have been like if you had not missed your stop?" Olivia reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at all of this, at our children and our home and our life together, and I thank God for that missed stop. I was so scared that night, so certain I had ruined everything. I had no idea I was exactly where I was supposed to be." "This was always your stop," Benjamin said softly, echoing the words he had spoken to her that first night. "You just did not know it yet." "No," Olivia agreed, leaning over to kiss him, "but I know it now." As the years continued to pass, their children grew into fine young adults. William became a rancher like his father, taking over more and more of the ranch work as Benjamin's hair turned silver and his joints grew stiff from decades of hard labor. The twins, different as night and day despite being identical in appearance, both married well. Emma wed a lawyer from Cheyenne and moved to the city, while Grace married a neighboring rancher and stayed close to home. Thomas, the baby, surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a school in Williamsburg, and dedicated himself to educating the children of Wyoming territory. Through it all, Benjamin and Olivia's love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepening into something solid and unshakable. They grew old together, their faces weathering like the land around them, their bodies slowing but their hearts remaining young. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch, inviting everyone from Williamsburg and the surrounding area. The house was full of laughter and music, and the smell of good food, and Olivia stood in the middle of it all, marveling at the life she had built. Martha Green, now a sprightly 75, came over and embraced Olivia. "Do you remember when Benjamin first told me about you?" she asked. "How he had found a woman crying at the train station and knew immediately she was meant to be his. I thought he had lost his mind, but I was wrong. You two proved that sometimes the heart knows things the mind cannot understand. We did not we?" Olivia said, smiling at the memory. 30 years, and I love him more every day." "That is what it is supposed to be like," Martha said wisely. "That is what marriage should be." That night, after all the guests had gone home and the house was quiet again, Benjamin and Olivia sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a soft breeze carried the scent of sagebrush and prairie grass. 30 years, Benjamin said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I found you at that station, and sometimes it feels like you have been with me forever." "Both are true," Olivia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We have packed a lifetime of love into these 30 years, but it also feels like we were always meant to be together, like all the years before we met were just preparation." "I would do it all again," Benjamin said, wrapping his arm around her. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy. I would do it all again exactly the same way if it meant ending up here with you." "Me too," Olivia whispered, and they sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last beyond their own lifetimes. As Olivia drifted off to sleep that night, safe and warm in Benjamin's arms as she had been for 30 years, she thought again about that scared young woman crying on a train platform, certain her life was over before it had really begun. She wished she could go back and tell that woman not to be afraid, that missing her stop was not the end of the world but the beginning of everything beautiful and good. She wished she could tell her that in just a few hours, a kind-eyed cowboy would find her and speak words that would change her life forever. This was always your stop. But of course, that woman already knew. She had known from the moment Benjamin Tucker took her hand and offered her a home. She had known when she said, "I do," in a small church in Williamsburg, Wyoming territory. She had known with every sunrise that found her waking beside the man she loved, with every child she bore and raised, with every shared joy and sorrow that wove their lives together into something unbreakable. This had always been her stop. This ranch, this man, this life full of love and purpose and belonging. All the pain and fear and uncertainty that had brought her here had been worth it, because they had led her home. The years continued their steady march, bringing both joy and sorrow as all years do. Benjamin's father figure and mentor, Thomas Green, passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, and the whole community mourned the loss of such a good man. Martha followed him 3 years later, and at her funeral, Olivia wept for the woman who had welcomed her so warmly when she was a frightened new bride, who had taught her so much about being a rancher's wife and a mother and a friend. Their own children gave them grandchildren, And the ranch house that had once echoed with the sounds of William and Emma and Grace and Thomas now rang with the laughter of a new generation. Olivia delighted in spoiling her grandchildren, baking them cookies and telling them stories and slipping them peppermint sticks when their parents were not looking. Benjamin built them toy horses and taught them to ride and passed on all the knowledge he had accumulated over a lifetime of ranching. As they entered their 60s, both Benjamin and Olivia began to slow down. Benjamin's bad knee, injured years ago in a fall from a horse, bothered him more in cold weather. Olivia's eyesight began to fail, making the fine needlework she loved more difficult. But they adapted, finding new ways to be useful, new joys to replace the ones that age took from them. William took over full management of the ranch, running it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. He consulted Benjamin on major decisions, valuing his father's experience and wisdom, but the daily work fell to younger, stronger shoulders. Benjamin struggled with this at first, feeling useless, but Olivia reminded him that there was honor in knowing when to step back, in trusting the next generation to carry on what you had built. One fall evening, when Benjamin was 68 and Olivia 65, they took a walk around the property as they often did. The trees were turning gold and red, and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter was not far off. They walked slowly, Benjamin leaning slightly on a cane he had started using the previous year, Olivia's arm linked through his. "You remember the day we planted that oak tree?" Benjamin asked, pointing to a massive oak that now towered over the south side of the house. "It was just a sapling, and you said it would never survive the Wyoming winters. And you insisted it would because you are stubborn," Olivia said with a smile. "You were right, of course. It has outlasted both of us, or it will." "Everything we have built here will outlast us," Benjamin said, looking around at the ranch, the house, the land that had been his life's work. "William and his children will keep it going long after we are gone. We have created something that will endure." "We have created more than that," Olivia said softly. "We have created a family bound together by love. We have created memories and traditions. We have created a legacy that has nothing to do with land or cattle, and everything to do with showing our children and grandchildren what true love looks like." Benjamin stopped walking and turned to face her, cupping her weathered face in his work-worn hands. "I have loved you every day of our life together," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Even the hard days, especially the hard days. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia Tucker." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Olivia replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. "You saved me that night at the train station, but you have continued to save me every day since. You have shown me what it means to be truly loved, truly valued, truly cherished. I am the luckiest woman in the world." They continued their walk, talking about the past and the future, about their children and grandchildren, about all the small and large joys that had filled their years together. When they returned to the house, the family was gathering for Sunday dinner, a tradition that Olivia had insisted on from the very beginning, and that continued now, even though her daughters-in-law did most of the cooking. The house was full of noise and love and life. 3 generations gathered around the long table that Benjamin had built 40 years ago. William and his wife Sarah sat at one end with their 4 children. Emma had come from Cheyenne with her husband and their 2 boys. Grace and her husband Robert, who ran the neighboring ranch, were there with their 3 girls. Thomas had brought his new wife, a sweet young teacher named Catherine, and they were glowing with the news that they were expecting their first child. As Olivia looked around the table at all these beloved faces, These people who existed because she had missed a train stop 35 years ago. She felt her heart might burst with gratitude. She caught Benjamin's eye across the table, and he smiled at her, that same warm smile that had made her feel safe and loved from the very first day. After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and the children were playing in the yard, Benjamin stood and clinked his fork against his glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to say something," he announced, and the room fell quiet. 35 years ago, I was in Rawlins picking up supplies when I saw a young woman sitting on her trunk at the train station, crying as if her heart was broken. I could have walked past her, minded my own business, gone home alone as I had done for years. But something made me stop. Something made me ask if she was all right, and that decision changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. He looked at Olivia, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. That woman became my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. She turned a house into a home, a piece of land into a legacy. She gave me a reason to work hard and a reason to rest easy at night. She gave me love and laughter and purpose. And I want all of you to know that every good thing in my life, every single good thing, came from that moment when I chose to stop and help someone in need. "What your father is trying to say," Olivia said, her voice trembling with emotion, "is that love can come from the most unexpected places. I thought my life was over when I missed that train stop. I thought I had ruined my only chance at a future. But your father taught me that sometimes the things we think are disasters are actually blessings in disguise. He taught me that home is not a place but a person, and that love is worth any risk. We want all of you to remember that," Benjamin continued. "When you face hard times, when things do not go as planned, remember that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when everything seems to go wrong. Your mother and I are living proof of that." There was not a dry eye in the room when he finished speaking, and the rest of the evening was filled with hugs and reminiscences and expressions of love that left everyone feeling full and blessed. That night, as Olivia and Benjamin lay in bed, she said quietly, "We have had a good life, have not we?" "The best," Benjamin agreed. "No regrets." "Not a single one," Olivia said. "Well, perhaps I regret that time I tried to make soap and nearly burned down the kitchen, but other than that, nothing." Benjamin laughed, the sound warm and familiar in the darkness. "I had forgotten about the soap incident. You were so upset, and the whole house smelled terrible for weeks." "You never got angry, though," Olivia remembered. "You just helped me clean up the mess and then took me into town and bought me proper soap. That was when I first realized what a patient man I had married." "Patient," Benjamin repeated with amusement. "Is that what you call it?" "I always thought of it as being smart enough to know that getting angry would not fix anything and would only make you feel worse." "Either way, I appreciate it," Olivia said, snuggling closer to him. "I appreciate everything about you, your kindness, your strength, your unwavering love. You are everything I never knew I needed." "We fit together," Benjamin said simply. "From that very first moment, we just fit, like two pieces of a puzzle that were always meant to connect." They fell asleep like that, as they had done thousands of times before, wrapped in each other's arms and each other's love. The winter that followed was harsh, with heavy snows and bitter cold that lasted well into March. Benjamin caught a chill that turned into pneumonia, and for a terrifying week, Olivia thought she might lose him. She sat by his bedside day and night, bathing his fevered brow and coaxing him to take sips of broth, praying harder than she had ever prayed for anything, and her prayers were answered. Benjamin's fever broke, and slowly, gradually, he regained his strength. By the time spring arrived, he was back on his feet, though he tired more easily than before and had to rest more often. It was a reminder that they were not young anymore, that their time together, though rich and full, was not infinite. They made the most of every day after that, finding joy in simple pleasures. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Afternoon visits from grandchildren who climbed into their laps and demanded stories. Evening walks around the property, slower now but no less sweet. Nights spent in each other's arms, grateful for another day together. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered again, and this time there were great-grandchildren running around, a fourth generation that carried forward the legacy of love that Benjamin and Olivia had built. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had first married. Reverend Matthews long since replaced by a young minister who knew their story and was honored to officiate. When Benjamin slipped the ring back onto Olivia's finger, his hands shaking slightly with age but his voice strong and sure, he said, 40 years ago, I promised to love you until my last breath and beyond. I have kept that promise every day, and I will keep it for all the days yet to come. And I promise the same, Olivia said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. You are my heart, Benjamin Tucker. You always have been and you always will be. The party afterward was joyous, filled with music and dancing and more love than could be contained in one place. Late in the evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in brilliant colors, Emma approached Olivia with a wrapped package. We all contributed to this, she said, gesturing to her siblings. We wanted you to have something to remember this day by. Olivia unwrapped the package to find a beautiful photo album, bound in leather and filled with photographs spanning their entire marriage. There were pictures from their wedding day, though they had been taken weeks later since photography had not been readily available on such short notice. Pictures of their children as babies, as toddlers, as awkward adolescents and confident young adults. Pictures of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Pictures of the ranch through the seasons, the house as it grew and changed, the family gathered for holidays and birthdays and ordinary Sundays. But the last page held something new. A photograph taken just that afternoon, of Benjamin and Olivia standing together in front of the church, holding hands and smiling at each other with expressions of such deep love that it took Olivia's breath away. Beneath it, written in Emma's careful script, were the words, "This was always your stop." Olivia looked up at her children, at their expectant faces, and could not speak past the lump in her throat. Benjamin wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Thank you," he said, his own voice rough with emotion. "This is the most precious gift you could have given us." That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Olivia and Benjamin sat together paging through the album, reliving 40 years in photographs and memories. They laughed over pictures of their children in various states of mischief. They marveled at how quickly the years had passed, how the tiny babies in early photographs were now parents and grandparents themselves. "We did good, did not we?" Benjamin said, closing the album and setting it aside. "We raised good children, built a good life, created something meaningful." "We did better than good," Olivia replied. "We did extraordinary, and it all started because you were kind to a crying stranger." "No," Benjamin corrected gently. "It started because you were brave enough to accept help from a stranger, brave enough to take a chance on something unexpected. You could have insisted on going to Williamsburg, on honoring your commitment to Ashford, but you chose to listen to your heart instead." "My heart knew what it wanted," Olivia said. "It wanted you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together, just existing in each other's presence as they had done for 4 decades. Finally, Benjamin stirred and said, "Come to bed, my love. Tomorrow is another day, and I want to spend every moment of it with you." As they settled into bed, Olivia thought about all the tomorrows they had shared, all the mornings she had woken up beside this man, all the nights she had fallen asleep in his arms. She thought about the life they had built from that chance meeting at a train station, about the love that had sustained them through good times and bad, about the family they had created that would carry on long after they were gone. And she thought about that scared young woman on the train platform, the one who thought she had ruined everything, the one who could not see the beautiful future that awaited her. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that woman that everything was going to be all right, better than all right. She wished she could tell her that missing that stop was the best thing that would ever happen to her, but in a way, she did not need to. That woman had learned it for herself, had lived it, had built an entire life around the truth of it. This had always been her stop. This ranch, this family, this love that had transformed her from a desperate mail-order bride into a cherished wife and mother and grandmother and great-grandmother. This had always been exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, gently but inexorably. Benjamin and Olivia grew older, their bodies failing even as their love remained strong. Benjamin's bad knee gave out completely, requiring him to use a wheelchair on bad days. Olivia's eyesight deteriorated to the point where she could no longer see faces clearly, though she claimed she did not need to see Benjamin's face to know exactly what expression he wore at any given moment. They celebrated their 45th anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their children, a small dinner at the ranch house. Benjamin was 83 now, Olivia 80, and they both knew they were living on borrowed time. But they did not speak of it, did not acknowledge the shadow that hovered at the edges of their happiness. Instead, they focused on gratitude, on appreciating each day they still had together. It was Benjamin who went first, passing peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night, his hand clasped in Olivia's. He had been feeling poorly for a few days, just a general weakness that the doctor said was his heart finally giving out after 8 decades of faithful service. Olivia had known the end was near, had seen it in the way he looked at her, as if trying to memorize her face, as if trying to fit a lifetime of love into a few final moments. "I love you," he had whispered that last evening, his voice barely audible. "I have loved you every moment since that night I found you crying. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Olivia had replied, leaning close to kiss his forehead. "Thank you for choosing to help me that night. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." "This was always your stop," Benjamin had said, echoing those fateful words one last time. And then he had closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, and sometime in the deep hours of the night, his heart had simply stopped beating. The grief Olivia felt was overwhelming, a physical pain that settled in her chest and refused to ease. But mixed in with the grief was gratitude, profound and humbling. She had been given 45 years with the love of her life, 45 years of happiness and partnership and unwavering devotion. So many people never found that kind of love even once. She had been blessed beyond measure. The funeral was well attended, the church packed with people whose lives Benjamin had touched over the years. William delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about his father's kindness, his work ethic, his devotion to family. Emma and Grace sang one of their father's favorite hymns, their voices blending in harmony that left not a dry eye in the church. Thomas read from Scripture, the passage about love being patient and kind, and everyone agreed that Benjamin Tucker had embodied those words completely. They buried him in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, the land he had loved and worked for so many years. Olivia stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and said her final goodbye to the man who had been her everything for 45 years. "Thank you," she whispered, placing a single rose on his coffin. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me a home." In the months that followed, Olivia found herself going through the motions of life without really living. She stayed at the ranch, cared for by her children who took turns staying with her, making sure she ate and slept and did not sit too long staring out the window at the view Benjamin had loved. She appreciated their concern, but part of her felt like she was just waiting, like the important part of her life was over and what remained was just an epilogue. But slowly, gradually, she began to find purpose again. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing on the stories of Benjamin, making sure the next generations knew what kind of man he had been. She went through the old photographs, the letters they had written each other during the few times they had been apart, all the accumulated memories of a long and happy marriage, and she found comfort in the life they had built together, the legacy that surrounded her. William running the ranch with the same care Benjamin had shown. Emma visiting from the city with stories of her work helping to establish schools for children. Grace and her family next door carrying on the ranching tradition. Thomas educating the next generation, passing on knowledge and wisdom just as Benjamin had done. On what would have been their 46th anniversary, Olivia woke early and asked William to take her to the cemetery. She sat beside Benjamin's grave, feeling closer to him there than anywhere else, and talked to him as if he could hear her. "I miss you," she said softly. "Every day, every moment. The house is too quiet without you. The bed is too empty, but I am grateful, Benjamin. Grateful for every day we had together. Grateful for the life we built. Grateful for the love we shared. You kept your promise. You loved me until your last breath, and I will keep loving you until mine." A soft breeze stirred the air, rustling the leaves of the oak trees that surrounded the cemetery, and Olivia chose to believe it was Benjamin's way of answering, of letting her know he was still with her in some way. She lived for 3 more years after Benjamin's passing, years filled with both joy and sorrow, as all lives are. She saw the birth of more great-grandchildren, celebrated William's 60th birthday, attended Emma's daughter's wedding. She watched the seasons change over the ranch, spring to summer to fall to winter and back again, the eternal cycle of life continuing whether she was part of it or not. And then one evening in early spring, as the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom across the prairie, Olivia simply did not wake up. She went to sleep in the bed she had shared with Benjamin for 45 years, and her heart, which had been steadily weakening since his death, finally gave out. She died peacefully, a small smile on her face as if she had seen something wonderful in her dreams. They buried her next to Benjamin, under a shared headstone that bore both their names and the dates of their births and deaths. But more importantly, it bore an inscription that William had chosen, words that captured the essence of their love story. "This was always your stop. Together forever." The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story that Benjamin and Olivia had begun. The house was expanded and modernized, but the porch where they had sat together so many evenings remained unchanged, a shrine to simpler times. The oak tree Benjamin had planted grew tall and strong, providing shade for summer gatherings and a landmark that could be seen for miles. And the story of how Benjamin and Olivia met, of the mail-order bride who missed her stop and the cowboy who found her crying and gave her a home, became part of family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a reminder that love can come from unexpected places, that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes, That fate has a way of putting people exactly where they need to be. Years later, when William was an old man himself, sitting on that same porch with his own grandchildren clustered around him, they asked him to tell them again about how their great-grandparents met. And William smiled and began the story, his voice warm with love and memory. It was a cold night in Wyoming territory, back in 1885, and your great-grandmother Olivia had just missed her train stop. She was sitting on her trunk at the station in Rawlins, crying because she thought her life was over when your great-grandfather Benjamin came along. The children listened with wide eyes, even though they had heard the story many times before. Because it was a good story, a true story, a story about love conquering fear and kindness changing lives and two people who were brave enough to take a chance on something unexpected. It was a story about finding home in the most unlikely places. It was a story about how missing a stop can sometimes be the best thing that ever happens to you. It was a story that proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the heart knows things the head cannot understand. And it was a story that would be told and retold for generations to come, a testament to a love that had lasted a lifetime and beyond, a love that had started with 6 simple words. This was always your stop.